The Wooden City. Once upon a time, a long time ago, there was a king who was poor. Now the reason he was poor was because he gave away all of his fortune to whoever needed it, and therefore everyone in his kingdom had enough to eat, enough to live, they all worked decent jobs, and everyone was pretty happy. But one day, while the king was gone, a wizard came to the city. And he looked around and saw people working at their jobs and saw that even though they had enough, not a single one of them was rich. And he gathered them all together. "People," he cried out, "look at me! Do I not have the most spectacular golden robe? Do I not have my pockets full of silver? Well, I am a wizard, and if you make me your king, I can promise you all the gold and silver you could ever possibly want." Now the people talked among themselves. Their king was a good king, yes, and it was true that under his reign nobody went hungry, but also nobody was rich. "And how will we get this gold and silver that you promise?" they asked. "What would we have to do?" "Oh," said the wizard, "nothing much. You would just obey my laws. You would just keep doing the same thing that you're doing now. If you make shoes, you continue making shoes. If you make cloth, you continue making cloth. But I will help you sell it. And I will make sure that you get all the gold and silver from your labor, more than you could ever even dream of. Will you make me your king, then?" Well, the people thought that it would be quite unfair to their beloved king who had done everything so much for them, but still, the promise of all the gold and silver they could dream of was even stronger. And so finally they gathered together and said, "Yes, yes, we will serve you, and we will make you our king." "Very well," said the wizard, and he climbed up to the very top of the roof of the palace, and he captured a live dove. And as all the people below him watched, he ripped out a feather from the dove and threw the bloodied white feather down onto the crowd. "Gold and silver shall be ours, and blocks of wood will serve my laws," until he had ripped that white dove into pieces. And every last feather had fallen upon the crowd, and with that the spell was complete, and all the people in the city were turned to blocks of wood. Well, when the king returned, he found that there were no guards at the gate. There were no people coming out to welcome him and cheer for him. He walked into the city, and it was empty. There was nobody at work, nobody tending the fires, nobody making shoes, nobody doing anything. "What has happened?" he thought. "Where are all of my people?" And he came to the palace, and there, in the great plaza, he saw all of them gathered together, staring straight up, looking at the roof of the palace. The king looked as well, but there was nothing there. He shook the wooden figures, but they were just painted dolls of wood, and their eyes stared blankly forward. "What has happened?" he cried. "What has happened here?" The doors of the palace burst open, and the wizard came out. "Aha!" he said. "Ah, king! Well, well, well. I am the king now, but you are just what I needed to make my spell complete." "What have you done?" cried the king, pulling out his sword. "Oh, no," said the wizard. "No, no, no. You wish your people to come to life?" "I do," said the king, putting his sword away again. "Well, then, You must do whatever I say. You must become my slave." "Very well," said the king. "No price is too high to pay. I am willing to sacrifice even my freedom to give life back to my people." "All right then," said the wizard. "Now, bring me the finest wood you can cut from the forest." The king did as he was told, and brought a great big pile of fine hard wood, and the wizard gave him some tiny little screws made of gold and silver. "Now," he said, "carve this wood into little wooden hearts, because, of course, the people, well, they have given their hearts to you. Now they have given their hearts to me, but together we can bring them back to life." Well, the king set to carving, and once he had a little wooden heart for every single of the people, he placed it carefully in each chest, and the wizard pronounced some secret words, and suddenly, dunka, 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 the wooden hearts started beating in the wooden figures' chests, and they started moving woodenly, and they went back to work. "Wait," said the king. "Wait! No, they're not alive. They're still made out of wood." "Ha ha ha! That's life enough to work for me," said the wizard. "No," cried the king. "You have not kept your end of the bargain, and therefore I will not keep mine." And the king escaped, running straight through the crowd of people who were marching woodenly, going back to work. He escaped through them, went out the gates, and went out into the world, searching desperately for somebody who could lift the spell. But even though weeks passed, he couldn't find anyone who could bring his people back to life. And the more he asked, the more people made fun of him. "What do you mean they're under a spell? The people in the city are fine. In fact, they produce the finest cloths and the finest shoes, and they make clocks and all sorts of things, and they sell them cheaper than anywhere else in the land." The king looked at them. "That can't be. They were just blocks of wood. How can you say that the people are alive?" And finally, he decided to sneak back in the middle of the night and see for himself. Well, the wooden guards were marching in front of the gate. But quickly the king watched and learned their schedule and was able to slip right past them. But once he got inside, it was the middle of the night. Everything was silent, except for this strange sound. Dunka, 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 dunka. Those wooden hearts beating in wooden chests. All the lights were on, and even though it was the middle of the night, all of the people were up and about, working, working, working. They were weaving cloth, they were cobbling shoes, they were fitting together clocks. They were doing all their jobs. Nobody spoke a word. The only sound was dunka, 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 dunka. "Stop!" cried the king. "Don't you recognize me? What are you doing? Why are you working in the middle of the night? Look at me, look at me." And just then he saw a girl walking stiffly by, carrying blocks of wood for the wizard's fire, to keep him warm during the cold night. It was the princess. It was the king's daughter herself. The king rushed up to her, grabbed her by the shoulders and shook her and stared into her eyes and said, "My daughter, don't you remember me?" "I remember nothing," said the girl. "But I have gold and silver in my pockets." And she kept on walking towards the palace of the wizard. "No!" cried the king. "You must remember. Everyone, listen to me. Rise up and overthrow him. Maybe that will bring you back to life." The people stopped and looked up at him. and their hearts eerily kept on making that sound. Dunka, dunka, dunka. We have all the gold and silver we ever wanted. Why should we rise up against him? The king continued shouting at them, making so much noise that the wizard, who did sleep, woke up. He came out in his robes, carrying a flaming torch, and looking out over the people. "Aha!" he cried to the king. "So you thought that you would dare rise up against me? Well, you shall see that their hearts are mine. Very well, slaves, tear him to pieces." The wooden people put down their tools and stood up and started walking towards the king. Dunka, 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 dunka. Even the king's daughter, the princess. "No!" cried the king, and he grabbed the princess's wood and threw it at the wizard. The wizard ducked, but his flaming torch instantly set the wood aflame, and the flame instantly caught fire to his fabulous, wealthy robes. With screams, the wizard went up in flames, and the wooden people stopped. And as the wizard went up in flames, suddenly the people started turning back into flesh and blood, and that dunka, 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 pum, turned into real hearts. They all looked around at each other in horror and watched the flames consume the wizard as he screamed in agony. And finally, all that was left of the evil wizard was a twisted, molten heap of gold and silver. The people shook themselves, looking around. It was the middle of the night. They didn't quite remember what had happened, but they had an idea. Well, the king took that twisted pile of gold and silver and set it up on a pedestal right in the middle of the plaza. And he wrote a big sign underneath it saying, "Whoever needs gold and silver may take from here." But you know something? Not a single person in that city ever even touched it. In fact, it's still there today, as far as I know. Now, it is kind of far away, but I could tell you how to get there if you wanted. The question is, if you were to go, and if you were to see that gold and silver, truly, would you really want to take it?